The ringing was an insult, a shrill digital scalpel slicing through the quiet hum of a suburban Tuesday in late October. The air carried the first real teeth of winter, a damp Maryland chill that promised frost on the lawns by morning. Sergeant Clayton Hayes, USMC, retired, was on his knees in his garden, a well-worn Fisker's trowel in one hand, a clump of stubborn crabgrass in the other. He grunted, a sound of pure physical effort, and ignored the insistent noise from the kitchen. Sarah would get it. She always did. This was his sanctuary, the neat 10 by 10 square of carefully tilled soil where the ghosts of Moscow and Fallujah couldn't find him. The high-pitched whine of incoming mortars in Anbar province was silenced by the rustle of autumn leaves. The cloying, sweet smell of cheap Russian perfume in a dimly lit apartment was replaced by the clean, honest scent of damp earth. Here the wars were simple and winnable. Weeds versus perennials, aphids versus ladybugs. The aluminum frame of the screen door slid open with a familiar, rattling protest. "Clay, it's for you," Sarah called. Her voice wasn't just annoyed. It was tight with that specific brand of frustration reserved for telemarketers and wrong numbers, a sound he knew as well as his own heartbeat. Some kind of wrong number, I think. They sound foreign, barely any static. Clay sighed, the breath fogging in the cold air. He wiped his dirt-caked hands on the heavy denim of his jeans, the fabric already stained with mud and grass. He hated the phone. It was an anchor, a direct line to a world of obligations and intrusions he'd fought for 20 years to leave behind. He trudged inside, his boots leaving muddy prints on the welcome mat, the scent of the garden clinging to him like a second skin. He took the cordless Panasonic receiver from her, offering a small, apologetic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Probably another scam caller. They're getting creative. Last week it was the IRS. Today maybe it's the UN. He put the phone to his ear. "Hello?" The line was unnervingly clear, but it wasn't just the absence of static. It was a dead, sterile silence, the kind you get on a secure digital line, not a crackling residential call. A man's voice, flat and utterly devoid of emotion, spoke with the unmistakable hard consonants and lilting cadence of Eastern Europe. The English was perfect, but it was the perfect English of a textbook, learned but not lived. It spoke a single, nonsensical phrase. "The sparrow has left the nest. I repeat, the sparrow has left the nest." Clay stood frozen, the phone pressed hard against his ear. The words meant nothing. A prank, a crossed wire from a local bird-watching society. But they didn't just enter his ear. They felt as though they were injected directly into the base of his skull, a cold, chemical cascade that bypassed conscious thought entirely. A switch was thrown in the deepest, darkest sub-basement of his mind. The trowel, still clutched in his left hand, slipped from his suddenly numb fingers and clattered onto the linoleum floor with a sharp, metallic sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence of his own mind. The vibrant green of his cherished garden, visible through the kitchen window, seemed to desaturate, the rich colors bleeding away into a spectrum of grays. His heart rate didn't spike. It did the opposite. It settled into a slow, heavy, metronomic rhythm, a drummer counting out a funeral march. 60 beats per minute. Precise. Controlled. "Who is this?" he asked. But his own voice sounded distant, a recording played back from another room. The muscles in his throat and jaw had formed the words, but the intention, the Clayton behind them, was already gone. The line went dead with a soft, final click. "Clay? Honey, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah's voice was a soft wave trying to break against a concrete wall. It was laden with 15 years of shared history, of concern, of love. He turned to face her, but his eyes didn't quite focus on her. They looked through her. The warm, familiar lines of her face, the worried crease in her brow, the way a stray strand of blonde hair fell across her cheek, they were just data points. Shapes and shadows without emotional context. A flicker of something ancient and buried, a ghost in his own machine, recognized her. It noted her concern as a variable, a potential obstacle to mission completion. Her proximity was a liability. "Wrong number," he said. The words came out perfectly, the tone placid, reassuring. A flawless imitation of the man who had walked in from the garden. "Just like you said." He bent down, his movement fluid and economical. The slight hitch in his gait from an old shrapnel wound in his right leg, a constant nagging reminder of a firefight in 2004, was gone. He moved with a liquid efficiency, each muscle firing in perfect, parsimonious sequence. He picked up the trowel and placed it neatly on the counter, aligning it perfectly with the edge. He walked past his wife, past the gallery wall of family photos, of their wedding in a small Maryland church, of their daughter Emily's first day of school, her face a mixture of terror and excitement, and his gaze slid over them without a flicker of recognition. They were decorations in a building, environmental clutter, nothing more. He went to the hall closet, a cramped space filled with winter coats, discarded sneakers, and the faint smell of mothballs. His hand went to the back wall, pressing a specific point on the drywall, a spot 3 feet up and 6 inches from the right-hand corner. A location that Clayton Hayes, the gardener, the husband, the father, had no reason to know existed. A small square panel, perfectly flush and painted over 6 times, popped open with a faint, oiled click. Inside, nestled in yellowed insulation, was a vacuum-sealed bag. Within it lay a slim leather wallet containing a Virginia driver's license, with a face that was his, but a name that was not, Robert Kane. There were also several $1,000s in used, non-sequential $100 bills, and a single, burnished key to a post office box in Arlington. Clayton Hayes, the man who loved the smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of his daughter's laughter, was gone. He had been a meticulously constructed illusion, a dream someone else had built. In his place stood Sparrow, a weapon honed in the frozen, soundproofed basements of the Lubyanka, a ghost who had been sleeping for 15 years, waiting for a simple, 5-word lullaby to wake him up. And he had a mission to complete. 200 miles away, in a windowless room deep within the sprawling Langley campus of the Central Intelligence Agency, Jack Callahan felt the familiar throb of a migraine begin its slow, agonizing crawl up the back of his neck. The room, officially designated SC2 Sub-Basement Archival Analysis Unit, was known to its few inhabitants as the Crypt. It was where old, forgotten Cold War cases were sent to die, and Jack, for all intents and purposes, was their undertaker. His desk was an island of controlled chaos in a sea of drab, gray filing cabinets. It was littered with declassified communiques yellowed with age, satellite photos of long-abandoned listening posts in the Urals, and countless translated transcripts of KGB debriefings, the pages smelling of ozone and decaying paper. For a decade, Jack had been a pariah, a prophet of a threat nobody wanted to believe in anymore. His obsession was a ghost of its own. Department 12 of the KGB's First Chief Directorate. Not the bomb makers or the assassins of Department 5, but the psychologists, the pharmacologists, the hypnotists. The men Victor Orloff, the department's shadowy chief, had called his architects of the soul. Jack believed they hadn't just practiced brainwashing, They had perfected it. They had pioneered a method of fracturing a mind and building a new, dormant personality within the cracks, a personality that could lie sleeping for years, even decades, completely undetectable, until activated by a specific, tailored trigger. He called it the Ghost Program. His superiors, men of the new century who worried about drones and cyber warfare, called it a fantasy, a waste of resources, a career killer. An alert chimed on his terminal, a low, unobtrusive sound he had configured himself. It was a low-priority flag from the NSA's Echelon system, specifically from an algorithm he'd written to scan for certain obscure Cold War-era keywords. Most were garbage, fragments of online chats or crossed phone lines. But this one was different. The keyword was sparrow, but it was the context that made a knot of ice form in Jack's stomach. The intercept was a short, encrypted burst transmission, a millisecond-long squirt of data on the 12.5 gigahertz Q-band, originating from a known Russian SVR diplomatic pouch relay in Ottawa. The destination was a disposable burner phone in suburban Maryland. The NSA's decryption was only partial, but the words were clear. Sparrow has left the nest. Jack's blood ran cold. It was a phrase he'd seen only once before, scrawled in the margins of a heavily redacted file of a KGB defector who had died of a sudden, inexplicable heart attack in a safe house just days after coming in from the cold. The defector had rambled to his debriefer about bird cages and awakening songs, about human weapons who didn't even know they were loaded, men who were hollowed out and rebuilt from the inside. He pulled up the coordinates of the burner phone's last ping. A residential neighborhood in Columbia, Maryland. Cross-referencing property records and tax data, his screen filled with a name, Clayton Hayes. A quick, deeper search brought up a service record, United States Marine Corps, Sergeant, Force Reconnaissance. Decorated, Navy Cross for actions in the Second Battle of Fallujah. A hero. Before that, a 3-year tour that made Callahan's breath catch in his throat. Marine Security Guard, U.S. Embassy, Moscow, 1998 to 2001. It was the perfect profile. A man trained in discipline and observation, placed in the Viper's nest itself during the chaotic, cash-strapped years of the late Yeltsin era, a time when the KGB's successors, the SVR and FSB, were desperate to prove they still had teeth. A man with access, with training, and with a vulnerability. Jack dug deeper, pulling up the old Moscow station's counterintelligence reports from the period. Hayes had been flagged, briefly. A minor fraternization incident. A whirlwind romance with a beautiful TASS news agency translator named Svetlana Petrova. The relationship was deemed non-threatening, a classic honey trap that went nowhere. The station chief at the time, a man now enjoying a comfortable retirement in Florida, had written it off as a young, lonely Marine blowing off steam. Jack saw it differently. He saw an opening, a doorway through which the architects could have entered. Svetlana wasn't the trap. She was the delivery mechanism. She didn't need to steal secrets from Hayes. She just needed to deliver Hayes to them. He grabbed his coat, a worn tweed jacket that had long ago lost its shape, his mind already racing, piecing together the nightmare scenario. He stormed out of the crypt and took the elevator up to the pristine, wood-paneled world of the agency's senior leadership, into the office of his direct superior, Deputy Director Mark Ellison, a man whose ambition was matched only by his utter lack of imagination. "Mark, I have a situation. A priority one." Ellison didn't look up from the tablet he was reading. "Jack, everything is a priority one for you. Did a ghost from 1983 send you a fax?" The condescension was thick and practiced. "A sleeper agent has been activated. A Marine war hero, Clayton Hayes. Stationed in Moscow, late 90s. I believe he's a product of Orlov's ghost program. Ellison finally looked up, his expression a carefully crafted mixture of pity and exasperation. The ghost program? Jesus, Jack, are you still on that? It's been 20 years. The Cold War is over. Viktor Orlov is probably dead or running a protection racket for a fish cannery in Vladivostok. We have actual threats to worry about. Algorithmic warfare, Chinese satellite killers, non-state actors with dirty bombs. This is an actual threat. Jack slammed a printout of the intercept onto Ellison's polished mahogany desk. This activation phrase was intercepted less than an hour ago, sent to a burner phone registered to an address 1 block from Hayes' house. He fits the profile perfectly. He was compromised in Moscow. They got inside his head, Mark. They planted something in there, and today, they just wound the key. Ellison glanced at the paper with disdain. The sparrow has left the nest? It could be anything. Drug dealers? Code for a fantasy football trade. You're building a cathedral of conspiracy on a single, ambiguous sentence. What's the risk in checking it out? Send a quiet team, surveillance, a black bag job on his house. The risk, Ellison said, leaning back in his leather chair, the picture of executive authority, is that you'll spook a decorated veteran with a Navy Cross, a family man, and I'll have 2 senators and a congresswoman on the phone asking why the CIA is harassing their constituents in an election year. You have no hard evidence. Only a 20-year-old theory you can't let go of. The answer is no, Jack. Go back to your crypt and file it away with the rest of your bedtime stories. Jack stood there, feeling a cold, controlled fury rise in his chest. He knew what he had to do. The system, blinded by its own modern certainties, wouldn't help him. He would have to go outside it. He was on his own. He's not a bedtime story, Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. He's a nightmare, and he's awake. Meanwhile, the man known as Sparrow was moving with calm, unhurried purpose. After retrieving the package from the wall, he went upstairs to the master bedroom. He opened his closet, pushing past the neatly pressed shirts and suits of Clayton Hayes. At the very back, behind a row of winter shoes, was a small SentrySafe floor safe. Hayes thought he'd bought it to store his service pistol, a Sig Sauer P226, and some important documents. Sparrow knew its true purpose. The combination wasn't a birthday or an anniversary. It was a sequence of numbers drilled into his subconscious through countless hours of drug-fueled repetition in a soundproofed room lit by a single strobing bulb. 198812. The year Department 12 was officially sanctioned by the Politburo. The safe clicked open. Inside, beneath the pistol Hayes used for target practice at a local range, was another vacuum-sealed bag. This one contained a set of tools, not wrenches or screwdrivers, but the subtle instruments of espionage. A miniature camera designed to look like a shirt button, a frequency scanner the size of a credit card, and a fountain pen. It was a beautiful object, heavy and black with a gold nib, a generic but expensive-looking design. To Clayton Hayes, it had been a retirement gift from his unit, a sentimental keepsake. Sparrow knew it was a weapon, a single-shot compressed gas-propelled firearm constructed almost entirely of a dense carbon fiber polymer that would be invisible to all but the most advanced terahertz scanners. It fired a tiny, needle-like flechette, no bigger than a sewing needle, made of frozen dimethyl sulfoxide to ensure it would dissolve without a trace in the target's body. The pen's ink reservoir was filled not with ink, but with a viscous, clear fluid. A potent, fast-acting neurotoxin, ricin, odorless, colorless, and utterly lethal. He took the pen, checked its mechanism with an expert's touch, and placed it in the breast pocket of his jacket. He took the wallet and the cash from the first package. He left the 226 pesos in the safe. A gun was loud, messy, and obvious. The work of an amateur. His mission required elegance, precision, and deniability. He walked back downstairs. Sarah was in the kitchen, her back to him, washing the muddy trowel in the sink. The part of him that was Sparrow registered her as a non-essential variable. The mission parameters were clear. No witnesses, no attachments. A cold, clean logic dictated the next step. Eliminate the variable. He took a silent step towards her, his hand reaching for the heavy cast iron skillet on the stove. His grip was perfect, his balance centered. But then, something flickered. A ghost within the ghost. A memory, unbidden and powerful, surfaced through the layers of conditioning. The scent of her shampoo, lavender and vanilla. A smell that had been a constant in his life for a decade and a half. The image, sharp and vivid, of her smiling at him across a sterile delivery room. Their newborn daughter, Emily, impossibly small and red-faced, cradled in her arms, the echo of a life. The conditioning was strong, a fortress of steel and concrete, but 15 years of love and normalcy had woven a deep, powerful counterspell, a root system growing in the cracks. The impulse receded, beaten back by a force the architects in Moscow had never accounted for. He stopped. He turned and walked out the front door, closing it softly behind him. He didn't look back. He walked to the end of the street to a bus stop, and stood there, a perfectly ordinary man in a jacket and jeans, waiting for a perfectly ordinary bus. The deadliest weapon in Washington, hidden in plain sight in his pocket. Jack Callahan operated on pure, distilled instinct. He couldn't use agency resources, so he used his own. He drove his nondescript Ford sedan to Columbia, parking 2 blocks from the Hayes residence. He wasn't a field operative anymore. He was a desk jockey with bad posture and a caffeine addiction. But the old skills, learned in far less friendly cities than this, were seared into his DNA. He watched the house, a perfect picture of suburban tranquility. Too perfect. He used a directional microphone to listen. Silence. No television, no conversation, just the low hum of the refrigerator. After 20 minutes, a woman, Sarah Hayes, according to the DMV photo he'd pulled up on his phone, emerged. Her face was a mask of confusion and worry. She looked up and down the street, got in her minivan, and drove away. Probably to check the local hospitals or call friends. Jack broke every rule in the book. He picked the lock on the back door, a simple quick-set tumbler that took him less than 10 seconds. The house was silent. He moved through it like a wraith, his senses on high alert. Everything was normal. Too normal. Then he saw the trowel on the kitchen counter, a smear of dirt next to it. A man in the middle of gardening doesn't just drop his tool and walk away. He went upstairs. He saw the open closet, the faint outline on the carpet where the floor safe sat. He didn't need to open it. He knew. His encrypted burner phone buzzed. It was a contact he maintained, against all regulations, at the National Reconnaissance Office. A young signals analyst named Amy, a prodigy who owed him for bearing a mistake she'd made early in her career. "You're not going to like this, Jack," she said, her voice hushed. "The burner that received the signal this morning, it just powered on for 30 seconds. Long enough to send a single encrypted data packet to a satellite uplink. And then it went dead." "Where?" Jack asked, his voice tight. "Pinged off a cell tower near Union Station, downtown D.C. "He's on the move," Jack muttered. Amy, I need you to do something for me. Run facial recognition against every public and private camera feed between Columbia and Union Station. The target is Clayton Hayes, and Amy, do it off book. If anyone asks, this conversation never happened. He hung up and ran out of the house. The chase was on. Sparrow disembarked at Union Station, melting into the bustling river of commuters and tourists. His programming was a flawless operating system. It guided him through the crowds, his path a model of efficiency, avoiding bottlenecks and maintaining perfect situational awareness without conscious effort. He moved without haste, but with relentless purpose. He bought a transit card with cash, took the Red Line Metro, and got off 3 stops later at Farragut North. He walked 2 blocks and entered a public library. He didn't go to the checkout counter or the reading rooms. He went to the nonfiction section. Dewey Decimal 937, Ancient History. He ran his hand along the spines of the books until he found it. A worn copy of Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. He took it to a secluded carrel. The book was a dead drop. He opened it, and his fingers found the subtle indentation in the back cover. A false compartment. Inside was a small, folded piece of rice paper, a one-time pad, a series of random numbers for coded communication, and beneath it, a laminated ID card. It identified him as a junior press aide for a small, obscure online news outlet called Global Truth Syndicate. The photo was his. The name was Robert Kane. He memorized the coded message on the paper, a short string of numbers. It was his target package. Location, U.S. Department of State, Harry S. Truman Building. Event, Secretary of State's keynote address on new NATO strategic initiatives. Time, 1400 hours tomorrow. Target, Secretary of State Andrew Sterling. Method of entry, Press Corps credentials. He sat there for a moment, the information slotting into place in his mind. Not as a plan, but as an immutable sequence of events. A future that had already been written. He then tore the paper into tiny pieces, went to the restroom, and flushed them away. He walked out of the library, now fully equipped. He was no longer just an activated agent. He was a hunter with a target. Jack Callahan was fighting a war on 2 fronts. The first was against Sparrow, a ghost moving through the city. The second was against the institutional inertia of his own government. He'd made a call to his one ally at the FBI, a senior counterintelligence agent named Ben Carter. "Jack, you're calling in the mother of all favors here," Carter said over the encrypted line, his voice thick with skepticism. "You're telling me a Marine war hero is going to try to assassinate the Secretary of State tomorrow, based on a crackpot theory about KGB hypnotists? Just get me the security schematic for the press access points at the Truman Building, Ben, and a list of all accredited press for tomorrow's event. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to trust that I'm not crazy." There was a long pause. "I'll see what I can do. But Jack, if this is a goose chase, you're not just burned, you're vaporized." The call from Amy at the NRO came an hour later. "Got him," she said, her voice electric with the thrill of the hunt. Facial recognition picked him up on a traffic cam getting off a bus near Farragut Square. He went into the public library on K Street. "Is he still there?" "Negative. He left 20 minutes ago." "But I've got something else." While he was inside, I tasked a signals intelligence satellite to do a narrow-band sweep of the area. I figured your boy might be trying to communicate. I picked up a faint, encrypted burst from a mobile device. Very short, very professional. It bounced off a commercial satellite. "Can you decrypt it?" Jack asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not a chance. It's military grade. Probably using a one-time pad." It's gibberish. But the destination of the signal, that I can tell you. It was routed through 3 blind relays and terminated at a server farm outside St. Petersburg, Russia. St. Petersburg, the modern home of what used to be the first chief directorate. It was the confirmation Jack needed and the one he dreaded. Sparrow was checking in. He had his orders. Sparrow found a cheap motel in Arlington, paying cash. He didn't turn on the television or open the curtains. He sat on the edge of the stiff, scratchy bedspread and began his final preparations. This was a process ingrained in him, a ritual of detachment. He field-stripped the pen weapon, checking the compressed gas cartridge and the firing mechanism. He reassembled it with the blind, tactile grace of a watchmaker. Then he began the psychological phase. The architects of Department 12 knew that even the most perfect conditioning could fray under stress. To counteract this, they had built in a series of mental triggers self-hypnotic phrases to reinforce the programming and scour the psyche clean. He closed his eyes. He regulated his breathing until it was barely perceptible. And he began the mantra, a silent chant inside his own skull. I am the vessel. The will is not my own. The mission is the only truth. As he recited the words, fragments of the past tried to break through. Not his past, not Clayton Hayes' past, but the fragmented, nightmarish memories of his creation. The smell of antiseptic and stale cigarette smoke. The face of a man with cold, intelligent eyes. Viktor Orlov, speaking to him in a soft, mesmerizing Russian voice. The feeling of a needle sliding into his arm, the world dissolving into a swirl of colors and sounds. Flashing lights synchronized to the beat of a metronome. And the voice, always the voice, repeating the same phrases, building a new reality, brick by painful brick, inside his head. You have no family. You have no history. Your only purpose is to serve. When you are called, you will obey. You will feel no fear. You will feel no remorse. You will feel nothing. The memories of Sarah, of Emily, of his life, were pushed down, locked away in a deep, dark cellar of his mind. The mantra scoured him clean. By the time he opened his eyes, they were flat, empty pools of gray. The last vestiges of Clayton Hayes were gone. Only Sparrow remained. The next morning, Jack Callahan looked like hell. He hadn't slept, his eyes burning from staring at a screen for 18 hours straight. He was running on stale coffee and pure, unadulterated fear. Ben Carter had come through. The press list and security protocols for the State Department event were on his encrypted laptop. He scrolled through the names, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. And then he saw it. Robert Kane, freelance journalist for a website called Global Truth Syndicate. A quick search revealed the site was a shell, a collection of plagiarized articles and stock photos, its domain registered 2 days ago through a proxy in Cyprus. It was a phantom, a digital ghost. The accreditation photo attached to the name was a face he now knew better than his own. Clayton Hayes. He's on the inside, Jack whispered, the words tasting like ash. He called Carter. Ben, I've got him. He's on the press list. Name's Robert Kane. You need to lock the place down, now. Jack, I can't just shut down a major diplomatic address because you have a hunch. The Secret Service will have my badge. I need more. What more do you need? He's using a fake identity linked to a shell company. His profile is a perfect match for a targeted intelligence asset. He was in Moscow. He was compromised. The signal from the burner phone was bounced to St. Petersburg. How many red flags do you want? Okay, Carter said, his voice strained. I'll talk to the Secret Service detail leader. I'm not promising anything, but I'll tell him we have a credible threat. They'll probably just enhance screening. They're not going to stop the event. Enhanced screening won't find what he's carrying, Jack said, his mind racing. It's not a gun. It's not a knife. It's got to be something exotic, something that can get through a magnetometer, plastics, ceramics, a chemical agent. He had to get there. He knew the Secret Service and the FBI would be looking for a bomb or a traditional assassin. They were playing chess. Sparrow was playing a different game entirely. At 1300 hours, Robert Kane, Sparrow, arrived at the diplomatic entrance of the Truman Building. He wore a slightly rumpled suit, a press pass clipped to his lapel. He looked tired, bored, just another journalist on a long, thankless assignment. He placed his laptop bag on the conveyor belt for the X-ray and walked through the metal detector. It didn't beep. He collected his bag and nodded to the security guard. He was inside. He found a position in the crowded press briefing room, standing near the back, a perfect line of sight to the podium, about 40 feet away, well within the effective range of the pen. He leaned against the wall, his posture relaxed, his face impassive. He checked his watch. 45 minutes. He regulated his breathing, conserving energy, his entire being focused on a single point in time and space. The moment Secretary Sterling would step up to the microphone. Jack Callahan screeched to a halt at a security checkpoint a block from the State Department. He flashed his CIA credentials at a uniformed Secret Service agent. I need to see Agent Thompson. He's the detail leader for the Secretary's speech. Tell him Jack Callahan is here. It's a code red situation. The agent looked at him, and then at his credentials, and spoke into his wrist mic. Seconds later, a man in a sharp suit with an earpiece materialized. Callahan, I'm Thompson. Carter from the FBI gave me a heads up. You're the guy with the ghost story. He's inside, Jack said, skipping the pleasantries. His name is Clayton Hayes, but he's using the alias Robert Kane. He's accredited press. He's not carrying a conventional weapon. It'll be something they missed at the checkpoint. Thompson's eyes narrowed. My men don't miss things. They do if they don't know what they're looking for. Look, I know this sounds insane, but I spent 5 years at the Moscow station. I know what their special weapons divisions are capable of. We need to evacuate that room. I'm not evacuating the Secretary of State and half of the diplomatic corps based on your theory. We'd have an international incident. What I will do is have my men locate this Kane and observe him. If he so much as blinks wrong, they'll take him down. Jack knew it wasn't enough. A takedown would be chaotic. The weapon, whatever it was, could still be fired in the confusion. He had to get inside that room himself. Then you need to get me in there. Now. Thompson hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gave a curt nod. He badged Jack through the security cordon. They ran through the marbled hallways of the State Department, Jack's heart pounding against his ribs. They reached the doors of the briefing room. Thompson spoke into his mic. All units, eyes on a male, Caucasian, late 30s, brown hair, wearing a gray suit. Name, Robert Kane. He's in the press gallery back wall. Do not approach, just maintain visual. They slipped into the back of the room. It was packed, hot, and noisy with a low murmur of conversation. The podium was bathed in the bright lights of television cameras. Jack scanned the crowd, his eyes moving, searching. And then he saw him. He was standing against the far wall, perfectly still. It was the stillness that was so terrifying. He wasn't fidgeting, not checking his phone, not talking to anyone. He was like a statue, a predator waiting in absolute silence. His eyes were fixed on the podium, and they were utterly vacant. It was the face of a man who was no longer there. "That's him," Jack breathed to Thompson. "The one by the wall." Thompson relayed the position to his team. Agents, disguised as aides and journalists, began to subtly shift their positions, forming an invisible net around Sparrow. At that moment, the doors to the side of the stage opened. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of State, Andrew Sterling." Applause filled the room. Secretary Sterling walked to the podium, smiling, waving. Sparrow didn't move, but Jack saw it. A minute, almost imperceptible shift. His right hand, which had been hanging loosely at his side, slowly began to rise. It was holding the black fountain pen. He was bringing it up, aligning it for the shot. Thompson saw it too. "Take him, now," he hissed into his mic. But the agents were still 10 feet away, fighting through the dense crowd of reporters. It was too far. They wouldn't make it in time. Jack's mind raced, a supercomputer processing a decade of research in a single, terrifying second. He couldn't shoot. The ricochet, the panic. It was too risky. He couldn't tackle him in time. He had only one weapon left. The ghost program. The conditioning. Orloff was a master. But even a master architect leaves a back door, a kill switch, a way to recall his assets if they were compromised. The defector's file. The rambling about awakening songs. There was another phrase.